All right, everyone. Hello. Hope everyone is doing okay. So today I'm just going to go through chapter 13, what the assignment is. We're getting pretty close to the end of the school year here. I think next week is supposed to be kind of like our last week of content. So we'll finish with chapter 14. And then we got a couple weeks after that for some catch up, whatever. We'll try and look at some kind of unit, summative, maybe another game of trivia or something that we could do just as, just a final wrap up. So this week, chapter 13 talks about impacts on the environment. So economic globalization, right? This whole concept of globalization obviously has pretty adverse effects on the environment. All of the different products that we use, we build, we, kind of export around the world all comes from natural resources. Most of the times we pull them out and then harvest them. Best example would be your Canadian crude oil up here in Fort McMurray, right? We pull it out of the ground. We then send it off to be refined and processed. And then it comes back to this consumer to use. Well, the same thing happens there. But that whole process of taking it up out of the ground, refining it, transporting it, all that stuff has a negative impact on the environment, right? Just as an example, there's lots of different things like that in our world. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So impacts on the environment. So resource development and land use. So society is defined not by what it creates, but what it refuses to destroy. So we have really moved away from caring about the environment like we probably should, right? We're seeing increases in climate crises and all kinds of different things with carbon in the atmosphere to rising sea levels, the acidification of the ocean. All of those things are negative. And it's because as human beings, we have kind of put our needs first, it seems, right? And if you look at like Aboriginal groups, they were always very big on the land and Mother Earth and all those different things like that. We've kind of moved away with that. How can we make money? How can we make sure that everyone has whatever? And it's affected our planet negatively. So I always found this interesting to discuss, right? So what is the importance of a tree, right? You think of a tree. So take a second, just think of a tree. There's trees everywhere. Go stare at a tree for a second if you got a second. And answer these questions. So what is the importance of a tree? So number one, it's an economic opportunity, right? A source of timber, a source of seeds from which trees will grow, an integral part of an ecosystem, a natural filter, a source of fuel, an essential part of the whole environment, an important habitat. Okay, so you can see all these different aspects of a tree, what it gives us. From fuel to rebirth and all these different things, a tree is a very important part of our society. Sometimes we take for granted, right? So who cares about this? So people working in the logging industry, right? People whose jobs revolve around trees, paper mills, those types of things. Those who need to build homes. So every single home you see has lumber, that came from trees, and it monitors the forest health. You can study ecology as asthma because of poor air. So what that means is basically, if you have asthma, right, what a tree does is it functions, it cleans the air, right? The more trees you have, the more oxygen that they emit. And so if you have asthma, a place that's heavily wooded or a forest is a positive for you. Okay. You need firewood, feel a spiritual connection to the land, and work to protect animal species. So all those different aspects of a tree are kind of reflective of our planet. So while our planet does provide an economic resource for us to use, to create, to build, to develop, at the same time, it is something that is part of our planet. And it's something that, there are spiritual connections that exist. We should be looking to preserve those things. Okay. So that's the importance of a tree. So let's flip over to our oil industry. Okay, so fossil fuels and oil and gas, they provide energy, fuels much of the world's transportation. Global transportation has increased from airplanes to cars, a lot more people that need to get around, right? Increased demand of fossil fuels. So developed countries use more fossil fuels because of a growing population, industrialization, right? The need to have fuel to power machines, to build, to deconstruct, to construct, to all these different things, right? Less developed countries increase their use of fossil fuels to become more competitive. And another thing is less developed companies are starting to get things like vehicle, right? Ethanol powered vehicles. And again, it's a huge demand. So although demand is plus, supply is limited, and time will run out of oil at some point in the future. Right now, we actually have a massive glut of oil, it's called. So we have so much because of the coronavirus and what has taken place, and global travel has stopped. People aren't going out as much. And so oil prices, gas prices are really low. I can't remember the last time I paid 90 cents or 89 cents the other day I paid to fill up my car. It's only because we have so much of it, because the world is not using it like we were 3 months ago, right? And some economists are not even sure that we'll ever return back to the levels that we could be. So just keep in mind that half an hour from where we are, like where we're sitting, where you're probably sitting right now, you can get up to the oil sands, right? The Canadian oil sands, the largest oil reserve in the world, some of it untouched. We pull out what's called crude oil. So it's not oil that you can necessarily use. It has to be refined, processed, and then it can come back to us. But it's only half an hour away from us. And part of our economy is very reliant on this industry staying strong. So some interesting statistics. If you want to take a second, pause it, you can take them out. So the top 10 largest oil producers in share of total world oil production, you can say we're right there. We produce a lot of oil. Now, we're not as crazy as places like the States, China, places that we'll say their political systems are set up for massive amounts of oil production. In Canada, as we're kind of left socialist, there is a huge faction of our population that cares about the environment. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of things. Like you look at these pipeline protests, right? You're dealing with Aboriginal people, you're dealing with environmentalists, you're dealing with people that are, socially conscious or socially responsible and saying, okay, all this oil production is great, but at the detriment of our planet, I don't know that it is worth it. Right. And so that's the question. So you can see here, largest oil producers, okay, and then you have the largest oil consumers. So although we have one of the largest oil reserves, we're not even close to the maximum amount of production like some of these other countries, right? It's interesting to consider when you think of politics and the role that they play. Leftists often are more anti-oil, anti what that does to the environment, that overconsumption, the carbon in the atmosphere. It doesn't help the planet, right? But again, there's a lot of us kind of in the middle that say, well, it's a necessary resource. It's something that we need. It's something that, our Canadian economy is based on. And when we limit production and we don't compete globally, you kind of see what's happening right now where oil prices are really low. We're kind of in a recession, our oil industry. Like for instance, just to give you some perspective, when I got up here 5-6 years ago, oil was at $100 a barrel of oil. Today, I believe it's trading at about $18. Okay. So 1/5 of what a producer here in Alberta could go out and get for that oil has now changed to 1/5 of that income, right? And so that affects your Canadian economy big time. So these are actually really great links for you guys to check out. I will just click on it here just to show you and just scroll through quick. But these are some really cool pictures of the Canadian tar sands from the air. So I'll just go through quick. This is all half an hour from where you live, right here. Right. You can, if you want to read these, when you get a second. This is waterways, I believe. Yeah, this is waterways. No. This is, what does it say up there? This is Gregoire Trailer Park. See all the oil. I always found it interesting when I was in Fort Mac. I'd go fishing and you could always see the oil right where the water meets the sand. You could always see the oil there. This is massive industry here. This is the impact on the environment you can see. Right. So if you want to spend some time checking on those pictures, go ahead. There's one more article I think that I posted too. It's really cool to look at the magnitude of what's happening. Okay, you can read about it here. This goes a lot more in depth on exactly what's happening. It looks at Fort Mac. It talks about the fire. I know these cut lines pretty well. A lot of deer hunting season. It's a pretty good spot to shoot something. No, I can't. I've already been on this site. So you're going to have to go back. You can check it out. But that's a Canadian tar sands. And let me make this big again. Okay. So each day, 600 meters of cubic feet of clean natural gas is used to produce oil sands. Okay. Enough to heat 3 million homes. So producing a barrel of oil from the oil sands produces 3 more greenhouse gas emissions than a barrel of conventional oil. So again, because we're the tar sands, ours is crude oil. It's very toxic. It's worse for the environment than other places that get their oil, right? Companies are licensed to divert 349 square meters of water per year from the Athabasca, right, for this project to get the oil out of there. 858 hectares have been reclaimed. This is less than 9% of the land mined. So they often talk about their reclamation efforts. And that would mean if, say this patch of land that you can see right there, they went in there, they took all the oil. What those companies are supposed to be doing is they're supposed to reclaim that land, which means planting trees, bringing it back to what it once was. So you can see there, about 8.5% of the land that they've used. And so this is over 50, 60 years now, has been reclaimed. That's not that good, but I mean, we have a lot of land to work with up here. So I think we need to do a better job on that. As much as we talk about reclaiming the land, but we want to return it back to what it was, because you can see, if you check those pictures out, once we're done, it looks pretty ugly, right? And we can't see it here. You live in the city, it's half an hour away. You don't get to see that. It takes that aerial view to really understand the impact on the environment, right? Which is negative. Now, not saying, oil is negative and the oil industry is terrible, because that is the, crux of our economy, especially in Fort McMurray. I mean, you look at our building, the Suncor Center for the Performing Arts, that's an oil company directly contributing to your educational experience, giving you that theater for different things. So, they are negatively affecting the planet. But again, it's not all evil. It's not all, I mean, you are putting profits in front of the planet. You hope that technology gets to a point where we can reclaim more than 9% of the damage that we do, but it is what it is, right? The economy functions and reliant on it. And so until we become, renewable, until we find renewable energies that we can move away from oil, this is kind of the reality that we're stuck in. Okay. So if you're interested, you can go take a look at page 275. A couple different Albertans have perspectives on this, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, right? I can definitely see the negatives on this, but I can also, I'm not ignorant to say, well, shut off the oil tomorrow. It'd be nice if we could use that money to transition to, solar and wind and natural gas, and train the oil workers, to basically embrace what's coming in the future, because this isn't sustainable moving forward, right? If we continue to harvest the oil at the rate we do for the next 50, 100 years, there won't be a lot of planet left for us to enjoy, right? And it's not necessarily our problem. It's your kids, it's their kids, it's generations down the line still to this day. But I think as a sophisticated and intellectual society, we can get to a place where we don't need to use crude oil and we can have, some kind of renewable. So check out that perspective. Which perspective most closely aligns with use? Should said yours, but use it is. So politics play a big role in this, right? Should land be left in its natural state as forest, wetlands, or desert? Or should it be cleared, drained, or irrigated to make room for roads, homes, and farms? So it's weird. Leftists would say, leave it as is. Right kind of politics would say, no, let's take those natural resources and use them, right? And so again, you're seeing your left, right, your politics kind of competing against something like this, the oil sands, resource development, what we're doing there. So politics. So in less developed countries, deforestation of Borneo's rainforest to make room for palm oil plantations, an example, provides an increased demand in palm oil, destroys natural habitat for millions of species. Okay. Now they do it for economic growth, just like European countries did in the 19th and 20th century. But because Borneo is late to the party, it's taken them this long to get to this point where they're taking these resources and moving them. And these enlightened people that for the last 200 years we've been going nuts, and they're just getting started. We've made our riches, and our countries are very affluent because of that. Is it fair to tell them to stop, right? So can we tell Brazil, just stop cutting the rainforest? Can we go into Borneo and say, stop with the palm oil? It's affecting monkey habitats and planet habitats negatively, right? This isn't right, when we were doing the exact same stuff for a really long time. And here we are, right? So urbanization, this idea that people are moving to cities. So the conversion of rural land to city or urban space. So by 2015, only 20% of the population in the world's most developed regions will not be urbanized. Okay, so that means 1 in 5 of Canadian populace will be outside of big cities. Fort Mac is not a huge city, but it's still considered a big city, right? So that outside rule would be like someone from like Grasslands or someone from like Lac La Biche, right? So no resources in the cities. Where are they coming from? Imported from rural areas and less developed regions. So it raises many concerns about the environment and others. And so what do you think of the effects of urbanization, right? This idea that we are moving to big cities and those sprawl, they get bigger, they get bigger, they get bigger. It takes land up. And the majority of trade and those things happen right in those regions, right? So consider that. Environmental regulations are a big deal here, especially in Canada. In the United States, with the right-wing Trump administration, they have basically gotten rid of all of these environmental regulations, and they've just been going nuts with the oil, fracking, things that are very detrimental to our, planet and the climate and all of the above. And they've just been going hard since Trump has been in office. And I'll show you a couple more examples of that. But the environmental regulation has been gutted. So when that happens, it makes it a lot easier for that oil company to go in there and exploit the natural resources. Okay. So here's an example. So resource development agreements, so negotiations between a corporation and the government. So the Mackenzie River Pipeline. So this is an example. So late 1970s, huge discovery of huge reserves of oil and gas in the far north. Want to build a pipeline. However, 10-year freeze on the project to settle Aboriginal land claims before construction. So 2002, new proposal, many land claims had been settled. Aboriginals were included in negotiations and were part of the agreements. So they've had major issues dealing with First Nations people, right? We know that they aren't necessarily treated properly here in this country. We have treaties that exist that to this day aren't necessarily being met. Well, the same thing happens here, right? Land claims, or the land that is owned by these First Nations people, they're trying to build pipelines through it. And sometimes it falls on their water source, or sometimes it falls on an ancient burial ground where family members are burying. And, they're very reluctant to give these companies the pass to, ultimately make money when they're really getting the short end of the stick. So that's one of the, kind of major issues that we see in Canada, is your First Nations group often push back against, and I think it's legitimately fair. Think if you owned a piece of property and you owned it for hundreds of years, and a company came and knocked on your door, and your grandmother and your grandfather were buried in the backyard and said, "Hey, we need to dig that up. We're going to build the pipeline right through there." I don't think I'm down, and again, take the racial bias of First Nations, or, Canadian or white or whatever. And just, I'm a human and I own this piece of land, and someone comes, I'm going to build this right through where your parents are buried in the backyard. I don't think I'm down. Right. And so oftentimes they're saying, well, the First Nations people, they get this, they get that. We've done this. I don't care. To me, it's like, it's my land. If I don't want you to build through it, don't. Now, I get there's massive political implications to something like that, right? Our whole economy, is reliant on this industry being successful. But again, right, to me, the most fundamental aspect of it is, if you're a landowner, I don't think people should be able to tell you what to do with your land. Okay. Now, that is what I think. That is not what history has shown us, but okay. So OPEC is a company you need to know what's up. OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So this basically monitors and sets the OPEC countries work together to control and regulate it, so everyone can have a little piece of the pie, everyone can make some money. Those non-OPEC countries are the ones on the outside kind of doing their own thing. Okay, so you can see here, OPEC, all in the blue here, kind of controls most of the world's oil. Negotiated by many governments with a common interest, making money, formed in 1960 to regulate oil production and markets, and the 11 member countries control much of the world's oil. Agree on level of oil production, control the supply for the worldwide demand of oil, higher prices, higher revenues for these countries, right? So to make it fair, so you don't have certain countries just dominating the industry, which we're seeing right now. We're seeing Russia and we're seeing Saudi Arabia pump out the oil, as well as America, to a point where we're kind of at a standstill globally. And Canada's being left out. I mean, you have these dictatorships, not America yet. It's slowly inching towards a dictatorship. It's my opinion. But we're competing with right-wing nationalist countries that don't have to answer to a voting population. So us here in Canada, where we're left and we're socialist and we're democratic and we'll vote on something like this. And if you don't agree with something, the government can't force you to do it. In those other places that are producing the most oil in the world right now, that's what's happening. They're just saying, well, we don't care what the average bear has to see. If it's in the best interest of our country, we're going to go forward and do it, right? And what fails or what suffers in that situation? it's not our problem. Okay. So environmental legislation to try and maintain sustainable development, avoid rushing resource development. Environmental law in Canada, companies may not dump waste into freshwater lakes and river. We have to dispose of waste in a more environmentally sound way. An exclusive economic zone, map on page 283. You can go check that out. I need to find my charger. Canadian officials. I don't know where my charger is, so this video might get cut short, but let's try it. Canadian officials have no authority to regulate fish stocks beyond boundary of the EEZ. Should all countries be required to uphold the same environmental standards? Okay. So these are different agreements that have happened between the countries. I'll give you a second to read through those. Okay, just take your time. Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Climate Accords. Really interesting video. America left it last year, or 3 years ago now. Trump's been in office. Detrimental to the world. Terrible for the global leadership that they were supposed to be. Again, this is all curbing climate change and protecting the world. So go ahead, check that video out. Learn about the Paris Climate Accord. It's really important. So for your assignment, try and be quick here. These are 4 activists. Okay, one's actually from like right where I grew up, like Manitoulin Island is like an hour away from my city in Sudbury, and that is Autumn Peltier. But you can see here, these are 4 examples of youth climate activists. These are people that are going above and beyond to stand on their platform and to try and change something through the way they can. Okay, so Autumn Peltier, she's a water protector. She's called her a water warrior from First Nations group. Greta Thunberg, right? The one that is always on TV. You got Martinez and Yrsa Hirsi, right? All of these different girls doing something kind of remarkable for the planet right now with their platform, same age as you guys. So for the assignment, this is what I'm going to have you guys do. I would like you to research one of these people or any youth climate activist. I could care less who it is, as long as you find someone that is somewhere involved in climate activism. Even if it's an adult, that's what you choose to do, that's no problem. Okay, and this is the assignment. So this is the Climate Warrior Facebook assignment. And so what this template does, it gives you the ability to go in and change every aspect of it. Okay, so everything is super editable. Okay, and you just put some pictures in. There's 4 slides to add some things, right? Like, you're not going to know their friends. Maybe you can find some good photos. Just do your best to kind of manipulate it, change it up, see what they like, see if you can do some research, find a cool example of a climate warrior. And again, go back, use these 4 girls. Their stories are awesome, all of them. Lots of really cool videos, lots of really cool things that they've been involved with. Go check it out. And yeah, that's the assignment. Hope you guys have a good week. If you need any assistance with this, it's a little techie, it's a little tough. You should be able to edit it right from the Google Slides app on your phone or a computer. That's all I'm going to require you guys to do for the week. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you guys next week with what the plan will be for the kind of the end of our year. Have a great week.